What's up, everyone? Welcome back to C&D Sports. It's been a little bit. We've been pretty busy, but the off season's been busy as well. And we've been meaning to talk about the MLB offseason. We finally got into it here. We got some winners and losers and teams that we're unsure about so far in the MLB offseason as we get prepared to head into the new year, which should be still a busy offseason. Again, still early, lots of moves to be made, but lots of moves that we can break down right now. So let's start off with some of the big winners here because there's a few.
We'll kick it off with the Mets. They bring in one of the greatest to do it, but they also lose one of the greatest in Jacob deGrom and obviously bringing in Justin Verlander. How do you feel about their offseason so far?
I mean, I have them down as one of the big winners here. They've obviously put the league on notice here. Steve Cohen has opened his pockets and has spent more than really any other owner that we've really seen in MLB history here. You know, with taxes and stuff, we're touching $400 million that they're going to have to pay. But that's the price that you kind of have to pay if you want to be a perennial success story. Does it mean that they're going to win the World Series? No, because the Dodgers have been doing it. The Yankees have done it in the past, and they have won, but they don't win every year. But they've been successful, largely successful for the past few decades. So they're buying success. And I think in terms of you lose DeGrom, but you pick up Verlander, when you can have and when you can have a starting rotation of Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, a little flashback to the early 2010s Detroit Tigers there. That is the makings of the best rotation in baseball. And to complete that, which I think they've done a great job, they let Taijuan Walker go, they let Chris Bassett go, but they replaced them with Kodai Senga, who is just his stuff in the NPB last year in Japan was just nasty. This is a guy that can touch triple digits here. He's just got gross movement on his pitches there. All in all, the consensus that some GMs have said is just he's nasty. He's just a nasty pitcher. And then you add Jose Quintana, you add a left-hander to that rotation that is keeps the ball in the ballpark there. You know, the lowest home runs per 9 innings last year, I think is a very telling stat. And I think that will certainly bode well for him in New York. And then you add them to Max Scherzer and Carlos Carrasco. If that's your top five and you still have options like Tyler McGill and David Peterson, that is the best rotation in baseball. And I don't think there's any question about that. And then they went on retaining in the bullpen too, retaining Edwin Diaz. I think that was the first major move of this offseason. And I think it was great. He was the best reliever in baseball last year. So let Timmy Trumpet sound again in New York as Edwin Diaz is their closer for the foreseeable future. And it's well-deserved. And I think he will anchor a very successful bullpen there. That also added David Robertson. They added Brooks Raley, a good left-handed arm in a trade with Tampa Bay. So they've got guys in the back end now that if something happens to Diaz, we have seen Diaz be successful when he was with the Mariners, comes over to the Mets, and he has shaky years. If he does have a shakier year next year, you have guys like Robertson, you have guys like Brooks Raley that have closing experience as well. And that's valuable in a bullpen to have guys that can step in when needed. And then in the lineup there wasn't too much they had to do in the lineup. I think they did have, you know, when you have Francisco Lindor, you have Pete Alonso, there's not a whole lot of ads you need to make. I think retaining Brandon Nimmo was huge because I think teams like the Blue Jays, teams like the Giants, there was a lot of interest in Brandon Nimmo because he was, after Aaron Judge, the best free agent outfielder on the market. And to lock him up for 8 years and say, you know what, we believe in you, we like you. I thought 8 years was kind of crazy. I expected him more to kind of get a short-term deal, more of a bridge style deal. But Brandon Nimmo, he got his 8 years. The Mets feel confident with him at the top of their order. And I think it's a great get. You lock him up. You have that long-term security in center field. That's a position you don't have to worry about. And when a team is spending like this, if you can spend for that peace of mind down the road, then that's why you need to spend the big bucks and spend into the luxury tax. And then also bringing in Omar Narvaez at catcher. I think that certainly is an upgrade on James McCann. I think he'll work well with the pitching staff, but will also offer a clear upgrade on the offensive end as well. I still think there are some needs here. a platoon left fielder there to complement Mark Canha, someone that can also step into the DH role and complement Dan Vogelbach and Darren Ruff. So I look at a guy like Jurickson Profar. He's a guy that can fit many needs. He's played multiple positions around the diamonds. So Profar is a guy, AJ Pollock, Adam Duvall, David Peralta. These are all guys that have a little bit of pop that they can offer, good offensively. Some are better defensively than others, but I think it's really the bat is what you're looking for here. So I think left field could be an option for them.
Yeah, and then we'll move on over to the New York Yankees out in the Bronx. And I mean, they're able to bring him back. Judge is remaining a Yankee.
Yeah, and you look at the few amount of arrivals coming into this team, that they've retained Judge, they've retained Rizzo, and they've only brought in Rodon and Canely. And you think that's only 4 additions / retentions here. That doesn't necessarily make for a winner. But when you can get Aaron Judge, when there was so much pressure being put on by San Francisco, and there was so much pressure in the last minute with that $400 million offer being thrown at him from San Diego, there were a lot of suitors that were coming after Judge, few serious suitors, but a lot of suitors nonetheless. So to convince Judge that being a lifelong Yankee is the best route for him, I think that's a huge win. It offers that stability of if Judge leaves, who are they going to build that lineup around? Because I think DJ LeMahieu, I think Anthony Rizzo, like these guys are a little too old for that right now. I think Anthony Volpe, Oswald Peraza, I think those guys are a little too young to think about building the lineup around. But when you bring back Aaron Judge, there is no question. It's built around Aaron Judge. It's someone that can anchor the lineup so that everyone can complement him. So in that sense, there's few additions to this team, but they got the biggest fish on the market right now with Aaron Judge. And I think adding Carlos Rodon to that rotation there really fills some of the question marks of who's going to be there behind Garrett Cole. Because I think Nestor Cortez, as good of a year as he had last year, making the All-Star team, he showed some of his flaws down the stretch in the regular season and then in the postseason as well. So you wonder if he's going to put up the same numbers as last year, and bringing in Rodon, obviously it's less pressure on him. And then you look at guys like Luis Severino. He's been injured in the past. Is he going to continue that injury route? Because when he is on the mound, he's solid. So I think Carlos Rodon really gives them that security up top as a number 2 in that rotation. Frankie Montas is another guy that's injured that should probably fill out that starting 5 there. A lot of questions have been answered with that Yankees rotation. With signing Carlos Rodon, you feel a little more secure. And suddenly, if everyone pitches to their potential, that becomes one of the top rotations alongside teams like the Mets in all of baseball. So I think that is something that they can really hang their hat on, that those 2 additions alone make them winners. And then you bring back Anthony Rizzo, a great clubhouse guy. He will certainly benefit from eliminating the shift this year. So his offensive production will only go up. So that's the great security they have at first base there. Bringing in Tommy Canely, that's another guy to add to the back end of the bullpen to complement guys like Jonathan Loaizaga and Clay Holmes. So again, that really solidifies the Yankees bullpen. As if everyone performs to their potential, then this could be one of the better bullpens in baseball too. And again, not a whole lot of departures there. Jameson Taillon going to the Cubs. We'll touch on that later. He had a solid year last year. That's probably their biggest loss, but guys like Miguel Castro, relief pitchers like that, they did a good job replacing them with Canely. And moving forward, I do think that they could use another relief pitcher, say an Andrew Chafin, to add that left-handed arm to the pen there. And I think a left fielder is something that they still feel the need to add there. Michael Conforto is a name I look at, maybe a trade with Arizona for Dalton Varsho, trade with Pittsburgh for Brian Reynolds. Jurickson Profar, who we mentioned for the Mets, I think is a guy that the Yankees could look at too, to really jump around the diamond. But I think one of their other biggest needs is figuring out what they're going to do with Gleyber Torres. I think Gleyber Torres is a guy that should be on the move. I don't really see a future for him with the Yankees. I think he needs a fresh start. He still showed glimpses of why he was a top prospect at one time, why he was that big return when they dealt Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs in the Cubs World Series winning year in 2016. He really showed why he can show why he was a top prospect, but I don't think he does it consistently enough for the Yankees right now that I do think he needs a fresh start. So figuring out what you're going to do with Gleyber Torres, maybe figuring out what the future holds for Josh Donaldson. I think those are what need to be addressed in the new year, really hitting the trade market for the Yankees. And I think guys like Varsho and Reynolds will be guys that could, maybe not in trades like that, but while they're making these other trades, those are other trades that they have to make to address that left field spot, because I think the trade market would be huge for them.
All right, we'll close out our big winners with the San Francisco Giants. How do you feel about their offseason so far?
It's been a roller coaster of an offseason so far. Obviously, being one of the finalists for Aaron Judge, I thought Aaron Judge was going to go there. Obviously, being one of the finalists for bringing back Carlos Rodon, one of the top pitchers in the market. I thought Rodon had a good shot at going back there. But again, missing on those two, you'd think obviously they lose the offseason, but then they went out and they got Carlos Correa, and that saved their offseason. Obviously, it's a huge contract, a 13-year deal. Will he play out all of that 13 years? Probably not, because at a position like shortstop, once you get to 35 and older, you probably aren't going to be playing shortstop if you're still playing. But this is what you need to do. This is where the market was going. Guys like Trey Turner and Xander Bogaerts getting 11-year deals. This was what had to happen for the Giants to really reel him in. And again, this is where the market was going. So I can't say it was an overpay. It's a big contract, but I wouldn't say it's an overpay. They got him at pretty affordable because they added those additional years onto his contract there. But he offers them now long-term here, someone to build this lineup around, someone to really make the face of the franchise. And that's what they were looking for in Aaron Judge. And they probably got the next best face of the franchise style guy in Carlos Correa. I think he will really carry the torch that a guy like Brandon Crawford had held for so long with those World Series winning teams, of just a solid everyday shortstop that you can really feel confident putting out there for 140, 150 games, however many games he plays in a year. And then they did well with their complementary moves there, bringing back Jock Peterson on the qualifying offer this after an all-star year last year. This could be a huge year for Jock Peterson to really up his value and make a name for himself in next year's free agent market. So I think Jock Peterson was a great addition to bring back there. Mitch Haniger, I think, is another great add to the outfield there, outfield DH style play. That was a good get to get him from Seattle. Great with the bat. I think he will bode well in the Bay Area. I still think they need to add another outfielder, but overall, their lineup looks pretty solid right now on paper. A few moves that they could make, but we'll get into that later. And then in their rotation, they miss out on Rodon, but they've been known to go after big reclamation projects like Alex Cobb, like Anthony DeSclafani, like Johnny Cueto a few years ago. And they've really brought their careers back to life. So I think Sean Manaea is a big guy. And I think Ross Stripling, who doesn't necessarily fit that role because he had a great year last year, but bringing him in on a matching 2-year, $25 million deal to Sean Manaea, I think those are great adds to really round out that solid rotation for them. And I say that Shelby Miller and Darlin Garcia have left, but those are easily replaceable guys. So really no departures, really only adding this offseason. They bring in Carlos Correa, I think made this team a winner. I think they could use some relief pitching like an Andrew Chafin, like an Adam Ottavino, like a Taylor Rogers. They could use some outfield help. They did say this year they wanted to add 2 outfielders. They kept Peterson, they added Haniger, so they need to add one more if that's what their plan was. So I think Michael Conforto, or again, I floated his name around before, Jerks and Profar. I think those are 2 names that a lot of teams are looking into, and I think San Francisco will be no different, and I think they'd be good ads for them.
Okay, and then we'll move on to a speed round of the consolation winners. They didn't have, the standout off seasons, but they still made some moves that make their team better.
Yeah, and there were some teams in the recent days that have moved up from even the losers category into the winners category here. I think the San Diego Padres, I think bringing in Xander Bogaerts obviously is a huge move for them. But I think their willingness to show your willingness to spend on guys like Aaron Judge, to try to reel him in, to try to spend on guys like Correa. They were swinging for the fences on a lot of guys, and even though they've missed, they've shown the willingness to spend and really up their status in terms of being an up and coming big market organization. So I think that's huge for them, and obviously bringing in Xander Bogaerts is huge to keep him at shortstop and really add to that young, talented lineup there. I think the Chicago Cubs were a team that I thought they were going to be a loser, but then they brought in Dansby Swanson this past weekend on a 7-year deal, adding to the likes of Cody Bellinger coming in this offseason, Jamison Tyone, really filling out that rotation. I think that's a good add for them. I think the Cubs have had a solid offseason right now. And I really love the thought of that infield of Dansby Swanson and Nico Horner up the middle, at short and second, respectively. That'll be an exciting infield duo for the future. The Houston Astros, obviously, you're going to be a winner coming into next season because they are the reigning champions. Then they go out and they add Jose Abreu at first base, and that was probably their biggest hole in the lineup. Between Mancini and Gurriel, there was really a thought that you could upgrade there. And Jose Abreu, only a few years removed from an MVP season with the White Sox, I think he's a huge add. At first, the Phillies bringing in Trey Turner, bringing in Taijuan Walker, that addresses their need at shortstop, their need for more rotation outside of Wheeler and Nola. And that's exactly what they got. That's exactly what they got this offseason. So they're a winner. The Atlanta Braves, it was a big trade, and they didn't have to give up a lot to bring in Sean Murphy behind the plate. Really lets Travis d'Arnaud focus on his bat now. And Sean Murphy, I think, will work well with a younger pitching staff of the Atlanta Braves. So I think that certainly helps them. The Seattle Mariners trading for Teoscar Hernandez this offseason adds to their outfield, adds some well-needed outfield help to complement Julio Rodriguez. So I think the Mariners are a winner. The Cleveland Guardians are a subtle winner here, with Josh Bell coming in the lineup, with Mike Zunino coming in. This is a team that was pretty low in the ranks when it came to power, when it came to home run numbers. And these are two guys that can really thump the ball. And these are two guys that I think will add to that power in their lineup and really keep them competitive in an AL Central that's really up for grabs. And the Milwaukee Brewers, I like, even though they got rid of Renfroe, they got rid of Wong, I like the Jesse Winker acquisition. I like William Contreras coming in behind the plate. And then I like the Owen Miller trade with the Cleveland Guardians as well, to really offer them an insurance policy for young guys like Bryce Terang in the infield, can really offer a platoon at second base. They've made some subtle moves I really view them as moves that move the needle and move it forward for them.
Then we'll move on to who has been the loser so far.
I think both LA teams, the Dodgers and the Angels, these are big market teams that I think we're in on guys, especially the Dodgers being in on Aaron Judge, being in on a lot of these shortstops here, being in on Verlander. These are teams that, with the players that they have, I look at the Angels with Trout and Ohtani, that they need to start spending big and spending big now. And I don't think that they've been able to do that this offseason. The Dodgers have made some moves. Obviously, the Angels made that early move for Tyler Anderson, but I think the opportunity was there for them to make big splashes in this offseason, because it was such a versatile and such a uniquely great free agent class this year, and they didn't take advantage of that. So I think they're obviously the two losers at the top. Obviously, they can still make big swings on the trade market. There's still some guys available on the free agent market that they could look at. But I think they need to act quick. I look at the Tampa Bay Rays, and after last offseason after last season, I think that there's some questions of whether they can continue to play this frugal style baseball and have the success. And I don't think they've necessarily answered that. I know the signing of Zach Eflin, it works well for them. But obviously trading away a guy like Brooks Raley, who was very successful in the back end of that bullpen for them, I don't think that helps them a whole lot. I think the injury to Shane Baz, I don't think they've done enough to address that in their rotation. So Tampa Bay, I don't really know what to expect. I don't really expect them to do a lot more. So I think they'll finish in the losers category here. And especially with everyone else in the AL East getting stronger, it seems, I think the Rays are starting to fall behind. I think the Oakland A's may not be in Oakland for too much longer. But I think the way that they approached the Sean Murphy trade, wanting big leaguers, I don't know why a team like that would want big league talent, but they were pretty steadfast. And, reports coming out of St. Louis that guys like Nolan Gorman and Alec Burleson were offered to them and they said no. And then to turn around and get Kyle Mueller and Asturi Ruiz, who I think are guys that could help them. Mueller could help them in their rotation day one. Asturi Ruiz in the outfield, I think they're guys that have potential. But I think when you have guys like Burleson and Gorman offered to you, those are guys that have potential and have shown it in the big leagues a lot more. And I think that kind of fits the future plans for a rebuilding A's team. So I didn't include too many rebuilders on this, but the A's, I think the way they handled that Murphy trade, they could have gotten a lot more for him. And then the Arizona Diamondbacks, when you're linked to bigger names like Xander Bogaerts and you kind of swing and miss, and they haven't pivoted yet. So, teams like Arizona weren't going to be front runners for big name free agents, but they haven't pivoted. And until they pivot, I still think that's a loss in the offseason so far. I think Arizona's got a good roster, and I don't think they'll be a bad team, but I don't think they've really taken advantage of the offseason like a lot of people thought that they would, and kind of be sleeper contenders for some big names. Because they haven't done that, I got to put them in the loser category so far, but they're a team that I think would trend more towards that unsure and that kind of winners category eventually as the offseason goes on.
And we'll wrap with the teams that haven't done poorly, but they also haven't done great. The teams we are unsure of.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that these teams have done poorly. I just think that there's more to do. I still think there's still questions to be answered, but they've done enough that I don't think that, or in some cases, they've done something so that I don't think that they can be considered losers so far. Some of them could trend towards that losing category by the time we look at this at the end of the offseason and say, okay, who won, who lost? But as of right now, I think because the offseason is so young, you have to consider a third category of unsure. And we'll start off with the Texas Rangers. Now, we talked a bit about DeGrom when we talked about the Mets. I think Jacob DeGrom is a great get for the Rangers. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great get for the Rangers. At 5 years, though, when he's played minimal baseball over the past few years, they were the only team willing to give him the 5th year, and hats off to them if that's what it took to get DeGrom. It's a gamble worth taking, but it's still a gamble. And sometimes you don't win off gambles. Jacob DeGrom could come out and continue to be that, unhuman pitcher that we're used to seeing and be the best pitcher in baseball. But he could come out and be injury prone. And Texas has taken swings on guys in the past. I look at Corey Kluber. They took a swing on him and he pitched one start and he went down with Tommy John. He went down, needed Tommy John. So Texas, they're willing to take the gambles, but I think they've taken a lot of gambles. Signing Seager last offseason, signing Simeon. They're swinging big for the fences. They want to compete in this AL West that at the time they made those 2 signings last offseason was still pretty open. There were still a lot of questions around everyone else. Some of those questions for other teams have been answered, with the Astros figuring out a life without Correa very well by having the World Series MVP and Jeremy Pena cover short. The Mariners ended their playoff drought and they have Julio Rodriguez really taking control of that franchise. And I still think there's some question marks with Texas, but maybe Texas can figure that out. I do like the DeGrom signing. I like the Andrew Heaney signing to complement that rotation. I think they have a solid rotation when you add them to the likes of John Gray and Martin Perez. But I still think there's some questions around Texas that I think they should address, and I think that they will address because they are showing the willingness to spend. Then I look at the Toronto Blue Jays. It took a while for Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro to make a move, but they did. They went out and they got Chris Bassett. They traded away Teoscar Hernandez. They brought in Eric Swanson. So they've addressed the rotation. I think they can continue to address the rotation with someone to fill that Ross Stripling role in that 5 spot and really add more competition with Kikuchi and Mitch White on who's going to take that 5 spot. I hear a name like Johnny Cueto being thrown around. That's an interesting name to consider. I think the Blue Jays, another question mark they still have. Teoscar Hernandez is gone. Who's going to fill that role in left field? I think a name like Michael Conforto comes to mind. There's guys that can fill that role, but they need to go out and answer those questions. That's why I have the Jays in the unsure category. I like what they've done so far. They're trending towards a winner, but I need to see more. The Chicago White Sox, their biggest need was how do we get 2 first basemen out of the outfield? Gavin Sheets and Andrew Vaughn are not outfielders. So Jose Abreu's on the move. That takes care of one of the spots there. Andrew Vaughn moves to first base. Well, we still have 1 first baseman in the outfield. Gavin Sheets could still project in the outfield so far, but they've added someone with that hole that's now been created by Andrew Vaughn by bringing in Andrew Benintendi to fill that role on a 5-year contract. I think he certainly adds some roundedness to that lineup. Adding another left-handed bat to that lineup, I think that was someone that, being from the Toronto area, the Blue Jays are talked about a lot. Benintendi was a name that was thrown around. There was a lot of teams in on Benintendi. So for the White Sox to grab him, I think that certainly moves the needle for them towards the winners category. But I still think there are some needs in that rotation to add a left-hander there. I still think there are some needs. There are some needs still in that outfield of what are you going to do with Gavin Sheets? Where's he going to be? Second base is someone that is a position I look at for the White Sox. So there's still some question marks, but they've done good so far. The Boston Red Sox, they've made a fair amount of moves, bringing in Masataka Yoshida, who some say he's the Japanese Juan Soto. We'll see on that, but I think it's a good get. I think Justin Turner's an interesting get. You lose out on JD Martinez. Eric Hosmer's now been DFA'd, so I think that gives them some corner of the infield DH. It fills that kind of question marks for them. Gives someone as an insurance policy for Tristan Casas as he looks to grow into that everyday first baseman role for the Boston Red Sox. So I think that answers some questions. But I think they've done a good job with that bullpen with Kenley Jansen, bringing in Chris Martin. So I think they've addressed the bullpen. I still think there are some questions around this lineup. I think until Rafi Devers gets signed, there's going to be some questions around long-term at third base and long-term for their future. They've let Mookie Betts walk. They've now let Xander Bogaerts walk. So I think there are a lot of questions of what does Boston want to do? Are they going into as much of a rebuild as you can when you have a major market team like the Red Sox? They'll never truly embrace a rebuild, but are they going to try to restructure, or are they going to try to go for it again like they looked like they were going for last year and had to quickly pivot once they fell out of a wild card race closer to the end of the year? So again, some question marks there. St. Louis, they brought in Wilson Contreras, so they have their replacement for Yadier Molina. They haven't had to address catching for a while, but you brought in a replacement for Yadier Molina. I think it's a good replacement. I think he offers you a lot more with the bat. It'll certainly Yadier Molina. There's very few defensive catchers like Yadier Molina. So I think Wilson Contreras is not a scrub behind the plate though. So I think he still is a good defensive catcher as well. But I think when you convince Nolan Arenado to take his player option and to commit to this team long term, I think they would have had to have promised him more than just Wilson Contreras. I think there's some questions around that rotation and what they're going to do with Jack Flaherty that I think they can be very active in the trade market to possibly bring in some more depth on the bench, to bring in some more depth in the outfield. I think there's still some question marks on the back end or just that bullpen in general. I think guys like Ryan Helsley are perfect for the back end, but who are you going to bring in to complement them? I think they could possibly bring in a relief pitching arm. I think, that bench needs some work too, but I think the St. Louis Cardinals are trending towards a winner, but they need to do more than just Wilson Contreras for me to really move the needle and make it past that wild card round that in now 2 different formats in 2 years so far, they haven't managed to get past that wild card round. How are they going to do that? And how are they going to show Nolan Arenado and the reigning MVP, Paul Goldschmidt, that this Cardinals team is a legitimate World Series contender? So I think there's still some moves to be made. And the Minnesota Twins are another team that I think they're trending towards a loser here. They lost out on Correa, but I didn't think they were going to get Correa anyways. But it still hurts losing out on Correa. I think they have a lot of questions with what are they going to do with the myriad of young outfield talent that they have, especially now that they've gone out and signed Joey Gallo, who I don't really think is a fit here. I think he'll be a lot better now that the shift rule has been taken out or put in place. So the shift's been eliminated. I think that'll help with his average because he was one of the worst hitters for average. I think he offers a lot of power, but I don't think that's something the Twins necessarily needed. So I think there are a lot of questions of where do the Twins go from here? And are they like the Red Sox? Are they going to contend or are they going to move into more of a restructuring type of phase? Because the AL Central, I think, is still very wide open right now that they could go out and contend, but they need to make the moves to show me that they want to go out and contend. And then the Baltimore Orioles, who, if you remember back to when we did our shortstops video, I had Carlos Correa going to, and boy, was I wrong on that one. But the Baltimore Orioles, they overachieved last year. But I think overachieving gives you that opportunity that if you want to go out and spend, you have the basis of a lineup that can go out and can win and put you at around 500. And how can you push them over that limit to get them over 500? And I don't really think they've made the moves to do that. I think they've made the moves they've needed by bringing in a guy like Kyle Gibson to complement that rotation. They needed starting pitchers. So to get a guy like Kyle Gibson is a good start. I think a guy like Adam Frazier offers an upgrade in that infield from Rougned Odor. But I still think there are some question marks of, can you bring someone bigger in? Can the Baltimore Orioles make that move to make them a definitive contender in the AL East? And I don't think they've made that move yet, but they've started well. So I think those are the teams that I'm unsure about so far. Some are trending upwards, some are trending downwards. So we'll see when we analyze this in a few weeks before spring, or I guess a few months before spring training starts, who won the offseason, who lost the offseason, and really kind of shore up some of these teams that we're unsure about.
Yeah, well, there you have it. Like Caleb said, stay tuned because we've got more baseball, more hockey to talk about, more sports, more fun. So we'll see you soon.